Hello again and welcome to the program. I am Suren. Since it has been often asked, I feel we should talk about also the issues of self-centeredness or narcissism. What is actually narcissism or self-centeredness? Good question. We are being told that those people who are only concerned about themselves and not others can be called selfish, self-centered, or narcissistic. There are also other related terms, which include egoistic, egocentric, and self-absorbed, all of which describe someone overly concerned with their own needs, desires, and interests to the exclusion of others. As you might be familiar with, here are some common terms to describe such individuals. Selfish. This word indeed is a common term for someone who is concerned only with their own needs and desires. Self-centered. This expression describes someone whose focus is overly centered on themselves, their own needs and interests. Narcissistic. We also discover that this term refers to someone with an excessive preoccupation with themselves, their appearances, or their own importance, often to the exclusion of others. Egocentric. This word suggests a person who thinks only about themselves and fails to consider the needs or perspectives of others. Egotistical or egotistic. Similar to egocentric, this term highlights the excessive self-interest or self-absorption. Self-absorbed. This describes someone who is preoccupied with their own thoughts, feelings, and interests. Let us ask that question again. What is it called when someone only cares about themselves? It is different from selfishness. Repeating our words, it is a person who is self-centered and is preoccupied with their own interests, needs, and wants. The way it is displayed to others is in a lack of attention to others' feelings. In other words, we can call this as careless, but not necessarily malicious state of mind. On the other hand, selfishness is a marked lack of concern for others, to the extent that someone may actively pursue their own goals and desires at the expense of others. At its best, this is a ruthless disregard for people. At worst, it is a downhill slope towards a sadistic desire, in a sense, to punish someone for their own dissatisfaction in life. It could be a father and mother, a daughter, or anybody. One can be selfish without descending into it, But let us not forget that such a person is on a slippery slope. Narcissism is described as the individuals who have an inflated sense of their own importance, a deep need for excessive attention and admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. Egoism in psychology refers to behaviors motivated by self-interest, often disregarding others' needs. Egocentrism is described as the inability to differentiate between one's own perspective and another person's perspective. Self-centeredness is a general term for someone who is preoccupied with their own desires, needs, and interests, often to the exclusion or even detriment of others. Self-absorption, describing someone who is excessively preoccupied with their own thoughts, feelings, and experiences, often at the expense of considering others. There's another word, solipsism. This is the extreme form of egocentrism, where one believes that only their own mind is sure to exist. These terms highlight different aspects and intensity of self-centered behavior, from general selfishness to more specific psychological or philosophical conditions. Retrospectively, defining someone as selfish or narcissistic involves looking back at their behavior and attitudes over time to identify patterns and traits that indicate self-centeredness or narcissism, which involves a comprehensive evaluation of their long-term behaviors, the impact on relationships, and their responses to various situations, drawing from both their actions and the perceptions of those around to them. Sometimes these labels are used as a lure or put down based on limited information and more of a self-opinionated feeling, often indicating a form of projection. Anthony Marriott wrote about egomania. He said, narcissists are often accused of egomania, but they are usually superficial egoists and are socially comfortable. Psychopaths are thought to be egomaniacs, but they are usually emotionally handicapped misfits with misaligned values. Politicians can appear to be egomaniacs as they do compromise values for specific goals. In fact, the same is true for capitalists. That's what he says. Often people will subjugate their personal values to implement their grotesque ideas. For example, racism may erode empathy and survival which will prevail over ethics. Outside the egomania, psychosis can erode the mothering instinct, further compartmentalize social comprehension, and segregate human feelings. Alas, those feelings which are of affection associated with specific socialization can be broken through trauma. Ayo Toye has written, "What is it called when someone only cares about themselves?" Good question, Ayo. Our first instinct is to conclude that they are egoistic or egotistic, egocentric, narcissistic, self-preoccupied, soloistic, self-interested, egomedical. However, this may not always be so. The study explores self-preservation and the complexities of human behavior in different situations. Simply labeling someone who prioritizes themselves as selfish does not capture the full picture and spectrum of possibilities. And so, key takeaway messages from this piece include thus: self-preservation is a priority. There is often the necessity of self-care, especially when facing challenges like illness or hardship. It is like being in deep water, wherein staying afloat is the first priority before helping others. Deception by appearances. The exterior may mask the internal struggle, making it difficult for others to understand the person's situation. Fear and selfishness. Fear can drive seemingly selfish behavior, but it is a desperate attempt to survive, not inherent malice. Compassion over judgment. People struggling with fear need support, not condemnation. Understanding the underlying cause can lead to more effective help. Healthy versus unhealthy selfishness. There is a huge difference between healthy self-care and chronic selfishness that regard, or rather disregard, the needs of others entirely. Can we then consider the power of boundaries? Setting healthy boundaries can help. Many people prioritize self-care without neglecting relationships. The words listed at the beginning of this episode are as valid ways to describe someone who prioritizes themselves, but they carry varying degrees of negativity in the context of the angle and perspective which we need to examine here. Self-preservation or focused on self-care might be more fitting description, as they acknowledge the underlying reason for the special behavior. In the light of the current perspective and contribution, it seems reasonable that a person should be able to explore the explanations and context of observed behaviors before attaching labels to them. And such examinations should be from an emotionally intelligent perspective, exploring with empathy, not otherwise. How can we be more understanding of the hidden struggles others might be facing? Good question. Oh yes. In the light of the current perspective, communication is an important element in support within community, encouraging people to express their needs even when they feel selfish for doing so, knowing that they will be received with empathy and emotionally intelligently rather than with harsh judgment or criticism is important. Creating systems that help people weather storms are related without sacrificing their well-being or resorting to fearful behavior is important. Collectively, the forerunning sheds light on this human condition and the importance of looking beyond the surface appearances to understand the motivations behind our actions. Labels can sometimes miss the mark, and indeed complicate or set back the opportunity for resolution or difficulty in the labeled as the narcissistic or narcissism. If one cannot stop talking about oneself and obsessed constantly about the way one looks, that one could be exhibiting narcissistic tendencies, meaning they are obsessed with oneself only, especially in regard to their outside appearances. Scholarly types may know that the word narcissistic is related to the Greek myth of Narcissus, a boy known for his good looks, who, after angered the gods, fell in love with his own reflection in a pool. However, Narcissus wasted away there, too fascinated with his own looks to save his own life. A narcissistic person may suffer similar fate. The adjective narcissistic describes those who are excessively self-absorbed, especially about their looks. Let's talk about the definitions. Adjective, characteristic of those having an inflated idea of their own importance. Synonyms: egoistic, egotistical, self-loving. Selfish, or concerned chiefly or only with themselves and their advantage to the exclusion of others. Autism, on the other hand, affects communicational skills, social interactions, and empathy. Narcissism is characterized by a grandiose sense of self-importance, but lack of empathy and the need for admiration from everybody else. Despite these differences, they share same similarities, such as rigidity in thinking or behavior and sensory sensitivities. Let's talk about the traits of autism versus narcissism. Autism and narcissism are two different terms that are often used interchangeably or are confused with each other. However, there are two distinct conditions with different characteristics. Autism and narcissism are two terms that are often used this way. However, there are two distinct conditions with different characteristics. Above and Beyond therapy explores the differences and similarities between autism and narcissism. To start, what is autism? Autism, also known as Autism Spectrum Disorder, or ASD, is a complex neurodevelopmental disorder that affects individuals in different ways and to varying degrees. It primarily impacts communication skills, behavior, and social interactions. Autism is a spectrum disorder, which means that it can manifest itself differently in each individual, and the severity of its symptoms can range from mild to severe. Some common challenges that people with autism may face include difficulty with verbal and nonverbal communication, social interactions, and so forth. Many people with autism experience sensory sensitivities and may have unique interests. It is important to note that autism can present challenges for individuals who have it. It is not a reflection of their intelligence or ability to learn. With appropriate support and interventions, people with autism can lead fulfilling lives and make significant contributions to the society. And now, what is narcissism? Completely the opposite to autism. A personality disorder that is marked by a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, a lack of empathy, and a strong desire for never-ending admiration from others. People with narcissistic attitudes tend to have an exaggerated sense of their own importance and abilities, and may believe that they are entitled to special treatments. Individuals with narcissism also have an unsatiable need for attention and admiration from others, and they often desperately seek out opportunities to be recognized or praised. They may be preoccupied with success, power, or physical appearance, and may use others to achieve their goals. In relationships, people with narcissism struggle to empathize with others and may also remain indifferent to the feelings of those around them. It is important to note that narcissistic personality disorder can have a significant impact on individuals' life and relationships. However, with appropriate treatment and support, people with narcissism can learn to manage their symptoms and improve their overall well-being. It needs to be diagnosed as early as it is possible. Differences between autism and narcissism. The main differences between autism and narcissism are based in communication skills, social interactions, and empathy. Communication. Well, people with autism have difficulty with communication, both verbal and nonverbal. They may struggle to understand social cues, gestures, or tone of voice. In contrast, people with narcissism, where they have excellent communication skills, but they use language to manipulate and control others. What about social interactions about them? Well, people with autism usually struggle with social interactions and may have difficulty making friends or understanding social orders. They may also have a limited range of interests or repetitive behaviors, in contrast to people with narcissism who may have a superficial presence and they seek social status and much attention. Empathy. People with autism may struggle with empathy or identifying the emotions of others. In contrast, people with narcissism may lack empathy altogether. Similarities between autism and narcissism. Despite their differences, autism and narcissism share some very closely related similarities. One of them is rigidity. Both autism and narcissism may involve rigid thinking behavior. People with autism may become fixated on uncertain interests or routines, while people with narcissism have a rigid sense of self or beliefs. What about sensory sensitivities? Well, people with autism may experience sensory sensitivities or interests, such as sensitivity to loud noises or fascination with certain textures. People with narcissism may also have sensory sensitivities, such as the obsession with appearances or grooming. The understandings and misconceptions about autism and narcissism as follows. There are many misunderstandings and misconceptions surrounding autism and narcissism, which can lead to stigma and discrimination against individuals who have these conditions. Here are some common elements that we need to look at. Myth number 1. Autism is caused by bad parenting or vaccinations. No, this is a common myth that has been debunked by numerous studies. It is a complex neurodevelopmental disorder that has a genetic basis. While environmental factors may play a role, there is no evidence to suggest that bad parenting or vaccines cause autism. Myth number 2. Narcissists are just confident or self-assured. Well, individuals with narcissistic personality disorder may appear confident on the surface, but their behavior often stems from an underlying sense of insecurity and low self-esteem. The need for attention and admiration can be seen as a compensatory mechanism for these feelings of inadequacy. Myth number 3. People with autism may lack empathy. Well, it is true that people with autism may struggle with empathy or understanding the emotions of others. This does not mean that they are incapable of feeling empathy altogether. In fact, many people with autism may be highly sensitive to the emotions of others, but have difficulty expressing their own emotions in social situations. Myth number 4. Narcissists cannot change. Can they? While it can be challenging for individuals with narcissistic personality disorder to recognize their behavior as problematic, they can learn to manage their symptoms through therapy and other interventions. With appropriate treatment and support, people with narcissism can improve their relationships and overall well-being. That is, if they can become aware of it. It is important to recognize that both autism and narcissism are complex conditions that require understanding and support from those around them. By debunking these myths and misconceptions, we can create a more inclusive society where everyone feels valued and accepted. How to identify the signs of autism and narcissism in children and adults? That's a good question. Now, identifying the signs of autism and narcissism can be challenging, but early detection is crucial for effective intervention in both cases. Signs of autism in children: delayed or absent speech patterns, difficulty with social interactions, such as making eye contact or responding appropriately to others, repetitive behaviors or routines. Sensory sensitivities, such as reacting negatively to certain textures or sounds. Fixation on specific interests or topics. Signs of autism in adults. Difficulty with communication, including understanding sarcasm or not-verbal cues. Difficulty forming and maintaining relationships. Sensory sensitivities that may affect daily life. Repetitive behaviors, routines or thoughts. Signs of narcissism in children. Exaggerated sense of self-importance or abilities. Lack of empathy towards others. Need for constant attention and admiration from others. Entitled attitudes towards others and their needs. Using others to achieve their own goals. Now, signs of narcissism in adults. An inflated sense of self-importance. Preoccupation with success, power, beauty, or other physical attributes. Tendency to manipulate people for personal gain. A lack of empathy towards others. An obsessive need for admiration from others. It is important to note that these signs do not necessarily mean that someone has autism or experiencing narcissistic personality disorder. However, if you notice these signs consistently over time, it may be worth seeking a professional evaluation. Early detection and intervention can make a significant difference in improving an individual's well-being. Service and interventions for autism and narcissism. There are several therapies and interventions that can help individuals with autism or narcissistic personality disorder, and through which their symptoms may become more controlled and improve their overall well-being. What therapy is better for autism treatment? Now, that's a good question too. Applied Behavior Analysis, or ABA. ABA is a widely used therapy that involves breaking down complex behaviors into smaller, more manageable steps. Through positive reinforcement, individuals with autism can learn new skills and behaviors, such as communication or social interactions. This can include centers utilizing ABA sessions, as well as in the child's home and school. What about speech therapy? Well, speech therapy can help individuals with autism improve their communication skills, including verbal and nonverbal communication. This type of therapy involves using visual aids, films, sounds, music, or other techniques to help individuals understand social cues or gestures. What about occupational therapy? Well, occupational therapy focuses improving an individual's ability to perform everyday tasks, such as dressing or grooming. For individuals with autism experiencing sensory sensitivities, occupational therapy can help develop results to better combat their sensitivities. What about interventions for narcissism? Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Now, CBT is a type of talk therapy that helps individuals identify negative patterns and replace them with more positive thoughts. For people with narcissistic personality disorder, CBT can help them develop more realistic sense of self and improve their relationships with others. What about schema therapy? Schema therapy is a longer-term format of talk therapy that focuses on identifying deeply rooted patterns of behavior. For people with narcissistic personality disorder, this therapy can help them understand the root causes of their behavior and develop healthier coping mechanisms. What about group therapy? Group therapy provides a supportive environment where individuals with narcissistic personality disorder can share their experiences and learn from others in civil situations. This type of intervention can also help individuals develop empathy towards others and improve their social interactions. It is important to note that there is no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to therapies or interventions for autism or narcissism. Each individual is unique, and their treatment plan should be tailored to their specific needs and challenges. With appropriate support and interventions, individuals with autism or narcissistic personality disorder can lead fulfilling lives and make meaningful contributions to the society. The role of genetics in the developmental state of autism and NPD. Research has shown that both autism and narcissistic personality disorder have a genetic basis in similar vein. While environmental factors may play a role, genetics is believed to be the primary factor that contributes to the development of these conditions of autism and narcissism. Study has found that there are several genes associated with autism spectrum disorder. These are involved in brain development and function, including communication between neurons and the formation of synapses. However, it is important to note that no single gene has been identified as the cause of autism. Genetics and NPD. Narcissistic personality disorder also has a genetic component. Studies have found that individuals with NPD may have inherited certain traits from their parents or other family members, such as the tendency towards excessive perfectionism or an exaggerated sense of self-importance. However, like autism, NPD is believed to be caused by a combination of genetic and environmental factors. It is therefore important to note that having a genetic predisposition for autism or narcissistic personality disorder does not mean that an individual will always develop these conditions. Environmental factors, such as upbringing or life experiences, can also play a significant role while they are on a developmental pathway. In conclusion, while genetics play an important role in the development of both autism and narcissistic personality disorder, it is only one piece of the puzzle. A better understanding of how genetics interacts with environmental factors can help us develop more effective intervention methods and treatments for individuals who have these conditions. Although from very similar genetic backgrounds, autism and narcissism are two distinct conditions with different characteristics. While autism affects communication, social interactions, and empathy, narcissism is, in contrast, characterized by a grandiose sense of self-importance, lack of empathy, and a greater need for admiration from others. We will meet you again by the next episode. Keep smiling and be happy. And once again, thank you.